Thank you very much. My name is Douglas Day, and I'm the director at the Youth Philharmonic, and this is the Active Youth Philharmonic. I've had the pleasure of working with them this year. It's been great having the numbers back up and having a pretty good full complement of strings, wind, percussion, and brass. It's a lot easier to pick music when I have that at my disposal to choose from. First piece was Coronation Fanfare. It's a great way to start a concert. The next one we're going to play is from the Moldau. It's an arrangement by Peter Spedna. He was a Czech composer in the 1800s. Moldau is actually the German name for the river, the largest river that goes through the Czech Republic. It's called Vltava in Czech language. And this piece represents two very important aspects of 19th century music composition. One being nationalism, the second one being nationalism, the pride in one's country. And so we have the river, which starts off as a very, very small sort of stream, and then grows into a much bigger river. And you hear the Moldau theme going on while we do this, repeated, and it gets louder and louder and louder. It goes by a hunting party, that you'll hear like the horns and the trumpets of the hunting party. It goes by a peasant wedding, you'll hear some of a polka type of dancing, and then it returns and grows even more. The second main thing that it has is program music, which is what I just explained. It tells a story. So nationalism and program music. So we hope you enjoy our arrangement of the Moldau. Thank you very much. For our final portion of our program, we're going to do something a little seasonal, which we always don't get to do. But tomorrow being St. Patrick's Day, we're going to play Leroy Anderson's Tiger Suite. This was premiered by the Boston Pops with Arthur Fiedler conducting in 1947. It actually has 6 movements in the entire suite. We're playing the first 3 in it, and we hope you enjoy it. Hopefully there's some recognizable tune, and we'll get you in the mood for tomorrow. Please enjoy our Tiger Suite.
You thought that was pretty, and so you clapped. Like, wow. Normally it takes fast and loud, like this. If it's soft and pretty, then the applause is right. But you were enthusiastic for beauty, just terrific. And An unprovoked act of beauty, and you responded. Thank you very much. Great. Okay, so now comes the last movement, and you'll know when to clap.
So, well, thanks for joining us this afternoon. And you know, for me, I've got to tell you that it's pretty busy and stuff, and we all sort of go through our schedules. I work with the Youth Symphony on Sunday afternoons, and I'm doing a bunch of other things. And I keep hearing that the Youth Philharmonic is rehearsing and that the numbers have grown over the last year. And it's really only until the February concert when I see them. and hear them. And then, of course, we get another shot at it at the joint concert we do today. And I am always in awe of what Mr. Doug Beta does with the Akron Youth Philharmonic. I've been back on the team here since 2017. Delighted to be working with Doug, especially when he gets the results he's been getting and the numbers he's been getting. And so a round of applause for my colleague, Mr. Doug Beta, and for the Youth Philharmonic. And then we get to combine two pieces with both orchestras together, and that's fun. And then we'll. But first, we're going to play a classic, one of the great scary classics of the symphonic repertoire. Night on Bald Mountain is one. In the Hall of the Mountain King, I guess, is another one. And then there's this one, Danse Macabre, by Camille Saint-Saëns. He composed it after having read a poem in which, I can't remember the whole poem and how it goes, but it starts out with zig, zig, zig. Death strikes a measure, something like that. And it's death playing on a violin, okay? And so it's a little bit of a little mortality thing we ought to remember now, okay? But everybody's doing good? Great, okay, so we'll play this piece and cheat death. But first, you gotta know this. We're gonna tune again. And we'll tune, and as you know, the strings are tuned in perfect fifths. Perfect fifths, right? So I'm going to ask for an A. Ethan, you hold off for a bit, okay? But let's have an A, and Williams, go ahead and take your A. Go ahead.
That's lovely. Great. Thank you. Good. Now for the strings, please.
So then, death, however, does not tune to perfect fifths. Death tunes to a diminished fifth. A, please.
E flat, just for sure. Yeah, bring it down a little more. There you go. There you go.
Okay, great. The diminished fifth, and some of you will know from your high school music theory class that the diminished fifth has a reputation. It's called by, it was so dissonant that they tried to avoid it back in the early church music. It was called the Diabolus in Musica. Yes, the whole music. How you doing? Such a nice kid. He played the devil for us. Here we are. Okay. So here's Camille Saint-Saëns' immortal classic. Immortal. Danse Macabre.
Is it for and everybody. I want to go to Paris, is what I want to do. Thank you. Who's been to Paris? Oh, some? Okay. The rest of you, you're going to go right now. I've been twice, and this piece is so magical. Gershwin went, he must have gone more than once, Gershwin went and then wrote this piece about his experience in Paris, or the experience of some perhaps fictitious American in Paris. But he goes through several adventures, and this piece captures so beautifully, I think, what you'll find of the sort of the moods of Paris, at least as you're seeing it for the first time. It starts out with the Parisian traffic, and there's this wonderful feeling of, oh, ooh la la, and then what you hear are taxi horns. Taxi horns, at some point, the horns and the violins all imitate taxi horns as he's strolling around Paris, and the rather distinctive sound of the taxi horns in Paris, so distinctive, in fact, that after Gershwin wrote the piece, he bought some taxi horns off one of the taxi drivers. And those taxi horns, whenever you rented the music, orchestras would have to rent the music, they still do, rent the music, and with the music would come a set of taxi horns. Because he wanted those particular sounds of those particular taxi horns. Well, we'll do a French taxi horn with an American accent. You'll see what I mean. And then, various other things happen. I think he sees a jolie jeune fille, and she sort of blows him off at some point. And then he's sitting there, he gets a little homesick, either that or he's sad about her having sort of ignored him. Or perhaps he drank something that didn't quite agree with him, because you will even hear him, it sounds like he gets a little queasy at one point. And then he really does get homesick, because out emerges this sort of laid-back blues tune, which you'll hear played coming out of the solo trumpet at the very outset. It's a famous, famous melody, one of the great melodies by one of the great melody writers, George Gershwin. Okay, so where are we? He's been sitting there. Oh, things pick up after a while, and he returns to his good spirits and gets over his homesickness and enjoys more of the Parisian energy, and that's what it finishes with. And I won't tell you anymore. You'll have to put it together yourself. And this is a somewhat condensed version made by the arranger John Whitney. Does a nice job with it. We're happy to play with both groups together, play An American in Paris and share it with you. Let's go to Paris.
it's good to see the older kids rehearsing and working with the younger kids. I think it gives some inspiration to the younger kids to keep working at it because it shows them how close they are to really moving on to that next level. And I hope it reminds the older kids what it was like a couple of years ago when they were a little bit younger. We're going to be playing Sergeant's Wicket. I don't think it needs much of an introduction, but before we play it, I do want to let you know that we thank you for coming out this afternoon, and there is a reception in the lobby area after, and you're all invited to attend. Thank you very much for coming out. We really appreciate it.